where I went to school, the military academy is separates where you live into basically 4 regiments with what goes A through H, or A through I, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. So 9. So 36 companies. And so it used to be that the company you showed up in your first year, you stayed until you graduate. But what was happening is in this military system, the first years don't really have a voice. They get a lot of crap. And so you're bringing in people to an organization where everybody's been together. The people who run it, the seniors have been together for 3 years, the juniors for 2, the sophomores for 1. And then your new people come in, and the seniors are saying, this is what we are. We're the nerd company. We're the drinking company. We're the jocks. And what was happening is basically your new people don't have a voice in a system like that that's very hierarchical, don't have much of a voice. And so they didn't have a choice. And so in studying these organizations, they realize, why does this company have so many people with bad grades? It doesn't make sense, because all the new people we're bringing in, we put the equal number of merit scholars here and we put the equal number of high SATs here. Like, this doesn't make sense. And it took their psychology department, known as Behavioral Science and Leadership, I think, who did a study. And they're like, oh, well, the reason is those people, that's the jocks. And the jocks define themselves as the opposite of the nerds. Right. And, why are all our Rhodes Scholars only coming from these 2 companies? Well, these are the only 2 nerd companies. But that doesn't make sense. We split our nerds up everywhere. Well, the nerds that went to the drinking company started drinking. And the nerds that went to the jock company, they got big muscles now. And they're making C's. And so it led to West Point actually introducing what they call the scramble, which is where during my time, after 2 years, you had to go completely to a different company. And so they never let anybody get together long enough to put a dominant thumbprint, and then they forced you to move around so that you be like, you go back to, we talked about my mom's book club. It forced you to have new blood, and you had to assimilate them. And so that helped to walk back some of the extreme characteristics that many of these companies had taken on.
Is that also part of the reason why you can only stay stationed somewhere for a limited amount of years? Isn't that part of the scramble too?
Yeah, basically also during my era. So some of this has changed a little bit to provide a little more stability for people, but basically the tour in a organization was 2 years if it was in the 48 states, and if it's outside of the 48 or international, a 3-year tour. And then so everybody, the impact of that is very similar, is that we were, during the 4 years that I was in Hawaii, 1/3 of the company was changing over every year. And by the time I had an extra year added on because I was leaving the Army, that was a very difficult year because there was nobody from the original time. So that unit that I came into and spent my first fairly formative months in even early year was completely gone. And I was the only walking remnant of a time that nobody else understood because of just a turnover like that, which from an organizational perspective has its benefits, as you and I are talking about. You prevent an extreme culture from taking hold. The downside is that type of, in that instance, people were moving across the country. And that's very difficult because it forces, or it is creating a lot of
there's a cost
churn on the family.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas bring it to a company with a fixed site, you may move people around a little more, and that doesn't mean that their kids have to change schools and change states. It just means that they're
You're intermixing the group more.
You're getting a little oxygen in the team. I mean, you can tell the story about the company we were with, the fire department that wanted to use your survey, that wanted to scramble everybody.
They did scramble everybody.
Yep.
We came in after.
Yep.
So they had, the groups had a lot of stability. And generally speaking, I mean, stability is usually good, except for that over time, you can wind up getting, because of this polarization that happens, you can get these little rogue states.
Yeah, fiefdoms.
Yeah, fiefdoms. Thank you. I was looking for that word. And they're not just working against other groups. They're also working against like the organization and leadership because they want to run things the way that they think should be run.
Yeah.
And they're basically blocking.
Yeah.
And so that particular fire department had that issue going on. And so they had already made the decision and already scrambled everybody. And the interesting thing was, which is a rare opportunity, is we did a network analysis on the communication patterns. And they hadn't told me that they had scrambled everybody. And I was so confused because I'm like, well, this is weird. Because they have poor communication within their group and they're talking to all these other people in other parts that aren't on the same aren't in the same station, aren't in the same shift. And I couldn't make heads or tails out of it. And so, the results are the results. And so we brought it in and we presented it and they're like, oh, it's because we scrambled everybody. And from a learning perspective, it was interesting because usually when we think about relationships, like the research on structure is pretty clear. Like people build relationships and communicate with the people who are right next to them. Like, if somebody's on another floor, they might as well be across the sea in another country because you're just not doing anything with them.
In a different time zone.
And so here I have this organization where that's not happening because they scrambled. And so it showed just how resilient communication pathways are once they've been established.
Yeah. People were talking to the old people.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't go back and do a follow-up study, but I assume that eventually the structure would take place and new channels would open up with the people who they're with every single day.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that just because they move people out, that they still didn't have like a pathway to them.
Yeah, it's interesting because you go back to the West Point scramble. That happens in between your sophomore and junior year, and your sophomore summers, you're starting to do stuff decentralized anyway. So basically you graduate your sophomore year with the company you've been together your first 2 years, and then you go and you spend your summer all over doing different stuff in the Army away from these people. And then when you come back, it's already been a few months. And so there's a tendency to, when you're back for the August stuff, you'll get together with some of your old friends and this and that, but they live a long way away, and then it starts getting cold and you don't want to walk to the other side of the campus on West Point. And so within a very short time, you're doing all your stuff with the new people who you live with.
Yeah.
Because the old people are actually, even though they're all still at the same college, they're way over there and it's cold.
Right.
But
if you see them, the conversation will strike up.
Oh, for sure.
And it's still there. Like the channel is still there. It's just basically inactive because the structure takes over.
Yeah. Yeah. That it's like you said, there's a little bit of a hangover from the old patterns, and it takes a while for the new ones. We've advised a couple times on organizations that were moving into new buildings. And we recommend that you think deeply about how it's set up. We had a place that, for a variety of reasons, went from like a ranch style setup where everybody was on the same floor to a multi-floor. And I mean, this doesn't take a rocket scientist, but we told them, like, if you don't spread people along those floors so that they have to take the elevators and going, they're going to come into the parking garage, go up to the floor, at the end of the day, go down to their car.
And never see anybody else.
Yeah. For a host of reasons, a place we work for basically split by functional area. And that entrenched existing fault lines in the organization. And that had unfortunately encouraged these different parts of the organization to feel more and more different. And so it's taken a lot of work to try to build bridges.
Yeah.
And not have people who everybody else thinks, well, you're same organization. But inside, they literally call themselves by their floor numbers. Like, oh, that's, like it's jokes, right? Oh, that's ninth floor stuff. Oh, no, that's how they do it on the ninth floor. And not helpful to...
Right. It's reinforcing a separate identity.
Not helpful to big group, big organizational kind of cohesion and teamwork.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think, like the fire department, the different fire departments and the military are a little bit different because you do have so many people who can actually be scrambled. Whereas a lot of organizations, like, you're in marketing, you're not going to finance.
Right. Yeah, sure.
And so the scrambling doesn't necessarily, and if you're in leadership, we do have a fire department that we've done work with where like they were like, okay, the BC job is only going to be 2 years.
Commander.
Yeah. And
that's a great idea, by the way.
It is a great idea.
Almost nobody will do that.
Right. Once somebody gets the position,
they don't want to let it go.
They don't want to let it go. But like that idea of scrambling the leadership to some degree, so that way there's always fresh blood, is also not a bad idea. But that goes to like the whole idea of like demotions, right? Like it's hard to be a BC and then not a BC. And so it rubs up against that. Like you wind up, it's temporary when you go and you enter that particular organization, but it's very hard to not adapt to that schedule, that level of salary, so forth.
Yeah, sure.